Good. Thank you very much. Then I will call to order the Public Works Committee of the Winston-Salem City Council. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I need to make a couple of announcements. One is that due to the Safer at Home order, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. A committee member will be recognized and will raise their hand and state their vote. Committee members of the Public Works Committee are Councilmember John Larson, the Vice Chair, Councilmember Annette Scipio, Councilmember Morticia Parman, and myself, Dan Bessie. And before we get into the substance of the meeting today, I've been asked to remind everyone that the deadline to respond to the 2020 census is now 15 days away. We wanted to mention that there is still time to respond to the 2020 census. And not only does the census determine our representation in Congress and in the state legislature, but it also ensures that North Carolina, Forsyth County, and Winston-Salem get our share of federal funding, and that can amount to billions of dollars in many cases, for local programs like road construction, emergency services, Medicaid, school lunch programs, and housing programs. Unfortunately, nearly 40% of Forsyth County residents have not responded yet to the census. And this, if it goes unremedied, will have a significant impact on our local community. So again, City of Winston-Salem is urging everyone to respond to the census. If you haven't done it yet, you still have time. To be safe, do it before the end of September. You can go online to my 2020 census my2020census.gov. Again, I'll do that over. My 2020 census.gov, or you can call 1-844-330-2020 and follow the prompts. Again, that's 1-844-330-2020. So please answer the census, because you count in Forsyth County, and Forsyth County depends on you being counted. With those announcements out of the way, we can go to our regular agenda, which, as always, is composed of two parts: the consent agenda and the general agenda. The consent agenda items will be adopted by one motion unless one or more of the items is pulled for separate discussion. Council members, are there any of the consent agenda items that need to be pulled for discussion?
Yes, C1 and C4.
C1 and C4. Any others? Is there a motion to approve the balance?
Move approval for the remainder of the ballot.
Second.
All right, moved by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Scipio. Is there discussion? Hearing none, those in favor will vote when your name is called. Vice Chair John Larson.
Yes.
Councilmember Annette Scipio.
Yes.
Councilmember Morticia Parman.
Yes.
And myself, Dan Bessie, yes. That passes unanimously, and we will move then to item C1, please.
Item C1, resolution fixing date for public hearing on a petition to close and abandon a portion of right-of-way of North Liberty Street located between North Main Street and North Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, located in the East Ward. Petition of Wildfire LLC.
Councilmember Scipio, you asked for this to be pulled, and it is in your ward. Please go ahead.
Yes. This was a new one for me, because normally when we were seeing some abandonment of property, it's always a sale. And in my investigations, I just needed the public to understand why this is not a sale of that property. So I think Mr. Duquesne can explain that and why it's being abandoned as opposed to being sold.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Chairman Bessie, members of the committee, and the viewing public. So the difference between this property and say a residential lot within the city is this property is actually right-of-way. There are statutes that govern how right-of-way can be disposed. In typical cases, and in accordance with the statutes, the property is properly abandoned by the city council, which is the process that we're following today. And then the property is then reverts back to the property owners that are adjacent to that property. So unlike a residential lot, which could be sold, right-of-way has to be disposed of in accordance with state statute, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeCain.
Yes, ma'am.
I move for approval of this consent item.
Second.
All right, it's been Councilmember Scipio moves approval. Councilmember Parman seconds. I see Councilmember Larson's hand up. Please go ahead.
I have a question for Mr. DeCain. On the map that shows the division of property is divided 3 ways with 2 private owners, basically splitting the lower half of the right-of-way, and the northern half of the right-of-way reverts to the city. Am I to assume that everything north of that parcel is owned then by the city all the way up to, I guess, what is that, Martin Luther King Drive? So we got a chunk of land there?
Yes, sir. I'm scrolling to find a map, but as memory serves, yes, sir, that's correct.
So that, yeah, I don't know what we use it for, but it ought to be something nice for Councilmember Scipio to put a statue on there or something. Put some art. All right, thank you.
A statue, thank you.
All right, the extraneous suggestion aside, is there further discussion? Seeing none. Those in favor will say yes. When your name is called, those opposed, no. Let's see. Vice Chair Larson.
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Councilmember Parman.
Yes.
Councilmember Bessie is yes as well. That's unanimous. We'll go now to item C4, please.
Item C4, resolution approving a contract with HDR Engineering of the Carolinas Incorporated to provide professional engineering services for the stormwater master planning updates in various watersheds of the city.
I believe this is also requested for discussion by Councilmember Scipio.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and fellow council members. Again, this is one that I was not familiar with, our stormwater master plan. And I found out a lot of information about this. So I would like Mr. Taylor to enlighten all of us on how long this has been underway, how it's being paid for, what these master plans are doing for us, and how many have already been done, and how many are still waiting to be done, and how long this particular one will take.
Good evening, Chairman Bessie, other members of the committee and council. I'm going to have Mr. Huff to give you a great deal of information about this. This is a very important thing that we need to do in order to meet our NPDES requirements for stormwater compliance. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Huff.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as Mr. Taylor said, this is an item that has been ongoing for decades now. As many of you are aware, the city has a NPDES permit to discharge stormwater to the waters of the state. And this was something that was issued to medium and large municipalities in the mid-90s. And that's when the first efforts to map our storm drainage system, do water quality analysis of the discharge coming from our system, and then basically look at the outfalls, see what we had, and to keep those things up as development has occurred. So, Councilmember Scipio, to your questions, This started a long time ago. There are 15 sub-watersheds that were originally composed back in the 90s. We still use those 15 sub-watersheds today. And these master plans go for water quality purposes in compliance with the permit. And in addition, we have added a flooding component to that as well. So the systems are updated and they're modeled using a hydraulic software, and that lets us know where we have areas of vulnerability in our system that needed to be upgraded, pipe size changed to accommodate additional development. So overall, the systems will be upgraded. Over 2,000 storm drainage structures are scoped in this particular phase, and they will be upgraded survey grade data, then updated in our geodatabase, and then the models rerun after that. So as far as the funding source for this has been the stormwater utility historically. So that will continue to fund these efforts. And of the 15 sub-watersheds in this particular phase, we're approximately halfway through. So be happy to entertain any other questions.
And I believe this was originally budgeted in fiscal 07-08 at around $10 million. And we're using those funds still. So this is a very long-term project that we undertook. And I think that speaks a lot to the leadership that thought enough to do this and budget for it 20 years ago. And we're still looking at it and resolving our issues with stormwater. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Scipio, second by Councilmember Parman, excuse me, to approve. Discussion. Hearing none, those in favor will please say yes or no when your name is called. Vice Chair Larson. You're muted.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Councilmember Parman.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So that's unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Let's move then now to agenda item G1, please.
Item G1, Winston-Salem Transit Authority Services Update.
I always love these transit updates. That's the part of the real work of this committee to oversee, and it's always important that we find out what is actually happening. Will this be Ms. McCullough or Ms. Woodson presenting?
Good evening.
Woodson tonight.
Chairman will be everyone's favorite general manager, Ms. Donna Woodson.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Damon.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Councilmember Bessie, council members, and the Public Works Committee. Tonight before you will have the Winston-Salem Transit Authority FY 1920 service update. Next slide, please. So this first slide is just to give you a recap of the beginning of our COVID-19 pandemic through current. What this slide shows is our ridership numbers. I thought it would be helpful to see where we were pre-COVID in 2019 versus during the COVID and the change. Of course, everything highlighted in red was a decrease in our ridership. So we compared for the fixed route from March through July, and we can see the variation of the decreases. We had the largest decrease in April, which was I guess it was the time of this period that was more significant, and we had a lot of higher cases. And the ridership that month decreased based on a lot of closures of businesses, restaurants, etc. So that's when we saw the largest change in our ridership to decrease over month to month. As well as TransAid, we see that from March through July as well. TransAid actually took a harder hit than the fixed route. And we contribute that basically to a lot of the adult programs that were shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as we had some closures for IFB, which is a large, one of our largest vendors that we service, and other locations as well. So that's the difference in the variation. And as you can see, we lost almost 50% of our ridership for TransAid in the month of April. Are there any questions on that? Okay, if none, we can go to the next slide. Thanks. This is our regional ridership comparison from fixed route. This chart was actually created by Mark Kirshner from PART and shared with my data analyst, as well as others are doing a regional meeting. And it actually just shows the ridership from COVID from other transit agencies, WSTA, PART, GTA, Link, and DCTS. So as you can see, we are the green line, and we are up there. We are proud to announce that although we lost ridership, we're amongst the highest as far as ridership is concerned overall. So in essence, we lost the least amount of ridership due to the COVID. And I like to think that, as well as staff, that's contributed to, we continued our Saturday service, which still covers a good amount of Winston-Salem. So we were able to maintain a decent amount of ridership, even though we lost some.
Yeah, I would just note that I think that you're right. That reflects a higher service level that we maintain. It also reflects some good work that you and your staff did to ensure safety of our drivers and to ensure that our passengers could continue to get on and off smoothly during this time. I was interested to see that of course there was the immediate huge hit, and we've rebounded a little further each month since then. That was included in the report there.
Yes.
And when we, at least as far as the close of the study period, when it settled out, it looked like we were at, if I'm remembering correctly, 65 or 70% of our pre-COVID ridership from last year, which would seem to track my recollection about estimates of our passengers or our rides that were job related.
Right.
So I mean, we're still seeing apparently most of the folks who were riding us before to get to and from work, I would guesstimate, are still riding us.
Yes.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Question,
Yes, sir.
Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Could somebody explain these abbreviations at the bottom, what DCT is, which is obviously a disaster? DCTS, what does that stand?
Durham?
Oh, that's Durham.
Durham
Davidson County. Davidson County.
I'm sorry,
Davidson.
Davidson County Transit Service.
Davidson County Transit, and GTA is Greensboro.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Link covers what area?
Lexington?
I believe Link is Lexington.
Okay, I understand.
I would have to check to be sure. I apologize. I am not sure about Link.
No, that's all right. I'm just curious. Blue is a disaster. Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, Davidson.
It's Davidson County, and that they took a heavy hit because there's a lot of rural area. So I don't know if that's the reason. I'm not really sure what caused that significant amount, but they lost a lot of ridership, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And PART is Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation, so that's the inner city buses that are run by our regional authority. I just realized that I don't see the High Point.
They did not participate in this process.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I can't say why, but they did. I don't know why, honestly, but they did not.
Yeah. I have a question to Ms. Woodson.
Yes.
Are our fares still free?
Yes, ma'am. They're still
And
free.
were the other cities here, are their fares free or not?
Their fares were free. GTA returned to fare-free service in last month, as well as Part. Part started back collecting fares, if I'm not mistaken, in July. But GTA started collecting fares in August, and I'm not sure about Davidson County, Northern Link.
And we're going to be free for how long? How much longer?
We anticipate being free, running free service until we get all of our driver barriers in place on the fixed route buses to protect our passengers as well as our drivers, and longer if necessary. We're going to continue to evaluate the current condition of the COVID and make a decision with staff to determine when it'll be safer to return to paying fares.
Yeah, I can also mention that, and Councilmember Parman will get right to you. One of the factors involved in Part's decision, I'm not sure about GTA, was that they only have one door on and off of their buses, and so the passengers coming in have to pass by the driver and the fare box anyway. Our safety arrangement to start with was passengers were coming in and out of the rear doors, and so that sort of excluded the opportunity for fares. Part also was experiencing some. Again, I don't know about GTA's experience. Part was experiencing some difficulties that were actually going to sort of counter to the safety goal from the free fare of folks who were basically, coming on to the Part buses and just using to cruise around. As opposed to, actually transit to and from work or other destinations. Councilmember Parman.
That link is actually with Burlington.
Yes.
That's their transportation system.
That's correct. I was going to say that. I was just waiting for an opportunity. Thank you, Councilmember Parkman.
No problem.
I had to look it up, to be honest.
Okay, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, Meredith, please. So here we are with our CARES Act expenditures. I wanted to provide to you tonight just a quick overview of where we have expended on our CARES Act so far. So as you can see, the PPE is all of our personal equipment, protective equipment that we've utilized. That ranges from masks, gloves, all types of disinfectant, the products that the cleaners use to clean the vehicles hourly as well as in the evening. That number also includes the driver barriers for the fixed route buses. So that's how much we've spent to date when this presentation was created. The temporary cleaners, that speaks for itself, is just the staff, the temporary staff that we hired to clean the buses hourly as they come into the terminal, as well as the helping us assist the maintenance in the evening to deep clean and disinfect the vehicles before the next service day. The marketing was all of the information that we put out to alert passengers and the citizens of what service level we would be working and operating, and any changes to our service to help to provide marketing efforts for making people aware of all the precautions that they need to take to help offset the spread of COVID-19. So that is the amount that we spent for marketing. Lost revenues, of course, that is our fare collections that we have lost because we're fare free on our Transaid as well as our fixed route. The payroll, COVID, sick pay, and bonus, that's what we've spent to date on that. That's for covering people that have potentially been affected or for contract tracing as far as people that were exposed. That's where the biggest chunk of that has come from, is people that have been exposed. Luckily, we have not had anyone to test positive as it relates to that, but they are paid to so they won't lose any time while they're out pending their results from their test and the quarantine period. The next item was the new hybrid buses that we have been approved for, and that's going to come out of the CARES Act funding as well. Operational supplies, the Guaranteed Ride program, that is how much we've spent with the Willard Taxi Service to provide service to any citizen that could not catch the bus during our normal operating hours since we're on a Saturday reduced schedule. The Union Station upfit and furniture, that is inclusive in the CARES Act expenditures as well. So to date, we've spent almost $8 million with a balance forward of a little over $4 million. And I will just say that what we have planned for that, we have to leave a certain dollar amount available for additional PPE because we don't know how long we're going to be in COVID-19. So we've spoken on that. We want to make sure we have enough CARES Act because that's what it's initially for, to offset any expenditures as it relates to PPE, the cleaning staff, or anything of that nature, including the COVID sick pay, to allow our employees to be paid if they are infected or potentially infected by the COVID-19. Are there any questions on this slide?
Any questions? I would just note that this is one of the few parts of the federal emergency aid that explicitly does not limit using the assistance for to make up lost revenue. So it was particularly helpful to the city budgeting to enable us to maintain the level of service that that we have to a greater degree than in potentially in some other programs, and which is, you know, very important for our riders. Please go ahead.
It is. It's very important, and I believe it came at a very good time, and it's definitely warranted. And that's one of the things that we're proud to have access to, so that we can continue to keep people safe by not allowing them to come in close proximity with the driver by requiring them to pay fares. So that's something that Mr. Duquesne and Ms. McCullough and I, and along with other staff, determined would be feasible and safe at this time, especially since we have the appropriate funding to offset the lost revenue.
Ms. Woodson,
yes,
how many people are in that Guaranteed Ride program?
Right now, we have about 19 participants that are participating in that program, but that they are only allowed, they have to go through an application, and the application process would determine whether or not their needs would be met if we were running our existing service, our existing routes, or during the time that we would ordinarily be operating. So if they meet that criteria, then they're approved for the program. So it's not a large population, but it's helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, Meredith. So this is our driver barrier. We are proud to show this. There were several different styles, but we felt we wanted to make sure that if we were going to make our drivers safer from COVID, we want to make them safer from everything. So with this specific driver barrier, as you can see, this is a picture of our board chair, Mr. Robert Garcia. He came by to visit for our meeting, and he was able to go out and see the driver barrier and get in the seat. He said, can I drive? I said, absolutely not. But he was able to get inside, and it not only protects from viruses and keeps that from the shield from that window there. As you can see, I had a video, but it wouldn't play. I apologize for that. But the window actually is automatic, and it runs up and down. It's controlled by the driver with the switch on the inside of the door. The door also locks from the inside, so the driver is the only one that could actually open the door. So if there's any unruly passenger or whatever, they can't get to the driver because that door is locked or unlocked by the driver only. It also has 2 fans because it does enclose the driver, so they'll make sure they have air circulating in there. So it has got a lot of little neat features. And as you can see, it does allow for fare collection because the fare box is not closed in. So we have already installed about 14 out of the 45 that we will install. And once we get them all installed on the fixed route buses, then we will have another conversation about returning to collecting fares. But the drivers seem to like it. They're going through and being, it's not a training because it's a door, but familiarization for the drivers. So we're getting them going through that now with the 14 that we have installed at this time.
Is that glass? Is the I guess it's not glass, but is it bulletproof?
It's not bulletproof. It's plexiglass.
It's that plexiglass
It's
stuff.
plexiglass, but it's not bulletproof.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Fortunately, that's been a moot point. I think we've not had any shootings on our buses, but that's certainly a reasonable question these days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Next slide, Meredith. Okay, now we get into some data with our fixed route ridership. And I purposely left we wanted to give you a complete annual rate display of our ridership. So we went from July 19 through July 20 of the ridership, and you can kind of see by the linear line how it fluctuates and how much ridership we've lost from July 19 to July 20. So we have lost a lot, but it's still, like we saw on the previous slides, we still have a significant amount of ridership to date, even though we have been significantly hit by COVID-19. Okay, next slide, please. This is the on-time performance as well. We did see a little drop in that. However, it's still above 80, which is still good given the situation that we're in, because the riders are getting on, getting off. We're having multiple buses out there because we have plug buses, because we have a 15 passenger limit. So what happens in that case, when the driver gets about 13 passengers, he or she will alert dispatch that they're almost to capacity, and they'll give their location, and then the dispatcher will dispatch another plug bus to that location to pick up passengers. So that has some effect on our on-time performance, but we're still ranging pretty high on the fixed route. Any questions? Okay, next slide, please. Now we're going to transition over to TransAid, and with the same period of time from July 19th to July 20. In July of last year, we had around 20,000 passengers. And as you can see, we almost lost about half of our ridership, because of COVID. And again, that was due to all of the closures for the adult daycare facilities, IFB, and, nursing homes. A lot of different things contributed to the loss in our passenger trips on paratransit. Okay, next slide, please. Now, the picture for TransAid was a little different because our ridership decreased almost half, almost 50%, especially in April. We saw an increase in our on-time performance, and that is a true picture of what actually happens when you have the same amount of drivers, because our wonderful city was able to keep our drivers working and not furlough or lay off. So we still had operators working, whether they were cleaning vehicles or actually going out making passenger trips. That helped with our on-time performance because they were able to get to the passengers on time, take them and drop them off on time, and return to the next passenger trip. So they've been able to maintain a good range in our on-time performance over 90 since COVID.
Ms. Woodson,
Yes,
I think TransAid is a wonderful service. Now, people have to apply for that. Is it based on income or is it just age?
It's not based on income, and it's not necessarily age. Age can be a factor for the over 60 program, but it's basically for age or disability.
Disabilities, okay. And I know we ordered some new buses for the big buses, but it looks like, if you tell me on-time performance increased because there are fewer passengers, because you can get to different places more efficiently when there are fewer passengers, does that suggest that perhaps we need a few more TransAid buses?
having more buses and more drivers definitely will help with our on-time performance. And luckily, this budget year, we were approved for 6 additional drivers, full-time drivers on our TransAid, and that has been extremely helpful in our on-time performance as well. So yes, ma'am, to your point, yes, more vehicles and more drivers would help with our increase in ridership to maintain an on-time performance, which means people are getting where they need to go to on time, and that's our goal.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this is the slide that I'm the most proud to speak on tonight. As many of you know, for the last, I don't know how many years, we've had a lot of accidents with Winston-Salem Transit Authority. Many different factors, I'm sure, as it relates to construction, changing of the routes, different things would warrant that. However, that was definitely one of my key objectives to my targets when I came on board was the accident performance and our ratio. And as you can see, from July 2019 to July 20, I am proud to say that we have reduced our accidents on both fixed route, TransAid, as well as maintenance. And this bar graph will show that one of my incentive programs that we implemented was the 5-star. I know everybody knows what the 5-star is. So I challenged my employees, my drivers, as well as my admin staff. So let's aim for 5 stars because we want to be the best that we can in this region. So with our accidents, we put in place an action plan. We started having monthly safety meetings to talk about different accident things that cause accidents, things to prevent accidents. We implemented a program where we have behind the wheel drivers that are actually a little step above the regular drivers that help with the training, retraining after accidents. Anytime an operator or an employee has an accident, we immediately bring them in for retraining that they have to do prior to returning to revenue service. So a lot of different factors went in there, just education and awareness, making sure that we are visible in the city so that the operators know I need to make sure that I'm following my basic defensive driving skills, because I never know, one, when a supervisor or a safety person or a GM is going to be watching, because we see something, we say something. So that's why we have the 5 stars there, because I feel that Winston needs to be recognized for the fact that they have really significantly reduced our accidents, and I'm proud to say that.
Bravo.
Thank you. Next slide, please. This is a slide that shows the percentage of our phone calls answered in our mobility management department. In each line or color is represented by a year. So of course, in 2017, you can see the amount of calls that came in and was answered through the mobility management department versus 18, 19, and 20. So in October of last year, then we made some changes to some of the procedures and the standard operating procedures in that department. And you can see the results of those changes being made, just schedule tweaking and different programs that we're running. So that shows how many calls that they're taking into the center downtown at the transportation center. Any questions? Okay, next slide, please. So this is just the FY 1920 expenditures for WSTA. I wanted to present that to you so that you can see kind of where the funding is going and how it's being spent. So that just gives you an idea, a pie chart of the expenditures and where we spend the funds. Okay, next slide, please. Along with the expenditures, we have the revenues. These are the things that we bring in to bring in funding for the city as well as transit, and that shows the dollar amount as well as the percentage of how much that represents each piece of the puzzle when it comes to our revenues. And I just see an arrow. Well, that's supposed to be miscellaneous. I'm not sure how that happened, but I apologize for that. That's supposed to be miscellaneous. Okay, next slide, please. So we have a project update. I wanted to make sure that everybody was, back a few months ago in an update, we talked about our phase 1 bus shelter installations. We have completed 17. We're still pending some encroachments agreements within the city. And then we have 2 that were currently in process. Actually, they're already in place for the phase 1, and that'll be complete. A brief update on the shelter pieces to purchase. We did have a contract selected, and you all approved that. And they have the first shipment was scheduled to come in October the 2nd. However, we've been made aware that due to COVID and the lack of workers and piece parts, that is going to be delayed. So I will make sure that I keep you abreast of when we get those pieces in, because we do have locations that are slated to have shelters once we identify and secure the contract with the contractor. The shelter phase 2, again, that's what I just alluded to. Once we get, we're going to have the current contractor has been slated to do the second phase as well, once we get all the shelter pieces in place and he can begin process. On the other side of the slide, we see that we have WSTA new bus stops. And early on, we had some issues. I know when we had the update or the resurface of the reorganization of the route system in 2017-18, WSTA used to have what they call criteria, where they would stop at a criteria. It could be at an intersection, or if there was a certain amount of distance in between, or the driver was making a left turn, as soon as they completed their left turn, they could pick up or drop off a passenger. So when the routes were reorganized and we did that change in our structure of service, that was supposed to end, and everybody was supposed to honor the green bus stops. But with staff and over the years, things happened, and we identified that there were drivers or passengers still requesting the criteria. So we had to go through there and look at all of our bus stops. And currently we have 1,525 bus stops and 84 shelters. So that's the dynamics of our system at this time. So we went through each route operations to see how far the distance was between bus stops, and we quickly noticed by passengers calling in requesting bus stops, drivers requesting bus stops, as well as staff, where we saw a need for additional stops so that we can make sure that we have stops in every location on all routes to omit that past practice of stopping at criteria. Mm-hmm. So that's the purpose of implementing these new bus stops before we make that known to the public that we're only stopping at green bus stop signs. So this is just a chart of the bus stops and the amount of stops that's being added to each route. Any questions on that? Okay.
Which route is 97? It's got a lot of stops on it. A lot of have been added.
Yes, 97 is a crosstown route, and I will tell you in just a second. Oh
yeah, 94.
So yes, 97 goes to. That's the north side circulator, Walmart, Target, Bethesda Park, Sam's Club. Mm. Okay. All right. Okay. Next slide, please. Also wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of the WSTA does more than drive. So we partner or sponsor a lot of different organizations to promote and help with transportation services to and from different agencies for participation. We did, and this is just a slide to show some of the sponsorships that we participated in. The Winston-Salem Festival, Accessible Festival that everybody's aware of for the disabled community. We participate in the annual MLK breakfast every year, the Gospel Fair. Gospel Fest at the fairgrounds. So we do a lot more than just drive routes. Next slide, please. This is just a couple more of the different community events that we take part in. The back to school supplies for children, health screenings on a monthly basis pre-COVID. We had a lot of health screenings that took place at the transportation center where anyone, riders, citizens, anyone walking by could come in and get their health, their blood pressure checked, different things, and they would refer them to doctors if necessary. So all of that takes place at the transportation center as well as other events. Next slide, please. The SOAR program, of course, I'm sure you all are familiar with that, with the former offenders resource fair. So that took place at the transportation center. We've had various hiring job fairs at the transportation center, and then the arts for bus shelters. In the next update, I will prepare and you all probably have already saw the fact that we had 12 artists that were selected for artwork on our WSTA shelters. And we were really proud of that because it makes the shelters look good. So we have some, I think 6 have already been installed, and there's 6 more. And we have been approached by people since then, artists that want to participate and want to get in on getting a shelter design moving forward. So I don't know how that's going to work, but it has sparked the interest, and it definitely makes the shelters look better. Next slide, please. So this is basically the what I just spoke on, the 12 artists that did their art pieces, and that was selected for the design for each one of the 12 shelters. In addition to that, the memory wall that is very familiar with everyone, the Art Council, the Arts Commission, they're looking at restoring that wall. So Tina Carson Wilkins is our marketing manager, and she's a part of that team, as well as one of our track members, Mr. Philip Cohen. So they have been participating in the meetings and making suggestions. They have an RFP that was supposed to go out, that went out on July 28th, so that they can restore that wall. And some of the recommendations that I've made through Ms. Tina Carson Wilkins is to, if they're going to restore it and make it beautiful again, to enclose it, some type of closure, whether it's plexiglass or a fence, to keep it and preserve it and keep people from utilizing it in other negative ways, because that wall gets a lot of negative attention. So it is our goal to restore it, but also to clean it up and clean up the area. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a picture of some of our 2019 Accessible Festival. And of course, due to COVID, we had to cancel this year. So this is just some of the fun that our disabled and elderly community get to partake in when we have this annual festival. They really, really come out and have a good time, dancing, eating, just laughing, and just being, noticed and being recognized, and showing appreciation from WSTA to our riders. So that's an event that we're proud to sponsor and to participate in annually. Next slide, please. And that is my presentation. I did have a couple, just to make sure. There were some questions previously that I wanted to address from Council Member Scipio, as far as the complaints at the transportation center on the cleanliness of the transportation center, as well as the loitering. That has definitely declined since COVID. The city has increased the staffing at the transportation center, so that was done to help with additional cleaning and sanitation efforts. We've seen, you go into that terminal now and it's totally different than it was pre-COVID. So WSTA greatly appreciates the additional staffing and hope that we can try to keep that up moving forward. But that has definitely been helpful. And security, North State Security, as well as WSTA staff, have been able to manage the social distancing and help with the loitering. So those things have been addressed, and they're doing pretty good at this time, even though we did have an incident today. Yes, we're doing better.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none.
I did have
Yes,
a
go ahead, please.
question. I think I had asked this, and I did get an answer from Mr. Duquesne. I know our transportation system is heavily subsidized, and we haven't operated where it's turned a profit because ridership is fairly low. But as we look to the future, has there been any discussion about expanding into the suburban areas, county areas? Have we ever surveyed people to see if they were interested in getting bus service? And I'm also reminded that when Salem Parkway was closed, we had special buses coming in, bringing people into downtown and into Winston-Salem. And I don't know if that proved productive, or did we set up some people who might want to continue that? I just wondered if we're thinking about looking at the future of having public service outside of the city.
Yes, ma'am, and I apologize if I meant to speak on that as well. But yes, we have identified funding in our Unified Planning Work Program to expand, look at a feasibility study to either expand our current service and just look at it as a whole to see what makes sense in order to make sure we provide service to the suburban areas as well as business communities, to make sure that we encompass people that need to get to work and from work. Yes, ma'am, we are looking at that, and we will be hiring a consultant to make sure we do that study and see what needs, what makes sense, and where we can go from there.
And you see that in maybe next year or something, or undertaking that, or what's your timetable?
Yes, ma'am. What we're doing now is we've been collecting a lot of data and making sure that we look at our ridership, and that's why, each presentation I'm showing you the ridership that we're collecting. We're actually collecting that data per stop as well, and then we have some other system technology that's going to help us to identify areas that would make sense to put public transportation in. So yes, that is going to happen in our near future, and we can say we're talking about that this year, and hopefully we'll have a study in place next year.
You might want to use the Nextdoor app that's marketing sort of shepherds, because they're in all over the city. That maybe that's a question if you want to sort of poll people to see if they might be interested in having bus service.
Yes, and we, Mr. Duquesne and Ms. McCullough and we've talked about potentially doing another survey. We did one in 2016, 17. We're looking at that as an option as well, to survey all of the citizens to see what they desire to see in a public transportation system here in Winston, Forsyth County. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a good opportunity for me to note, of course, that my tenure as chair of Public Works is going to be concluded in a little over a couple of months, and I certainly hope that one of our members who is another strong advocate for our transit system will take an interest in seeking this chair seat, because there will be some scrambling amongst the positions on committees, I imagine.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for Ms. Woodson? Seeing nothing, I will thank you again, Ms. Woodson, for a great job and a strong report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And please pass on our appreciation to all the drivers and staff at WSTA.
I will do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, let's have item, forgive me, the next item on the agenda, please.
Item G2, update on street resurfacing activities.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, is this yours? Mr. Duquesne, who's taking this one?
Well, good evening again, Chairman Bessie, members of the council and committee. As you're aware, the 2018 bond referendum provided funding for resurfacing, and I'm going to ask Mr. Keith Huff to give you an update about our progress.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this is a kind of a snapshot of where we've been in the last 12 months and where we anticipate going in the next year with regard to resurfacing. In the item, we're separating these projects down into what we're calling bond contract number 1 and bond contract number 2. In the table, first table following the information item, you can see the streets listed in bond contract number 1. This effort started with the council members receiving the selected streets based on their street rating, and then those council members selecting the streets to be resurfaced in their respective ward. This particular phase started in July of last year and was completed July of this year. And you can see the breakdown of the street segments when they were accomplished. And then we have some add-on streets that were completed as part of bond contract number 1. In addition to, ironically, we have the WSTA employee lot, the WSTA bus lot, and the WSTA transit lot that were add-ons to bond contract number 1. We also have some other streets that were add-on. They were problem streets that were chip seal streets we had repetitive complaints on. So those were included as a part of bond contract number 1. So started in roughly July of 19, finished in July of 20. And during that time, we had the next phase of work, which we're calling bond contract number 2. And earlier this year, we went out to bid, got bids for that, and that was awarded to APAC Atlantic. We did have a pre-bid meeting with them on August 6th, and were given some disappointing news that they weren't able to start immediately due to COVID restrictions and some personnel constraints, that we had to delay resurfacing activities until October so they could rekindle their staff, get square with the pandemic issues that fell upon their business. But we're optimistic they can get going in October. That gives us a window in the 2020 paving season of a month and change. We're hoping that we can get at least 12 street segments done, and then pick up in the spring and finish the contract by July of next year, hopefully. So on table 2, you can see the streets that are slated to be resurfaced, the street segments, respective wards. And then we have some other chip seal or BST streets that are included in that, and then some other streets that have special provisions like underlayment and things like that. So moving forward, in bond contract number 2, we expect to exhaust all the 2018 bonds monies that was allocated for these resurfacing efforts, and dip into approximately $400,000 to $500,000 of our annual PAL allocation. So we exhaust the 2018 bond resources and start moving into our PAL resources. So with that, happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. Questions?
I will say that, not a question. I wish we had more money, because we have a lot of streets that need resurfacing, a lot of bumps, etc. And I wish we could figure out how much more money can we get to do that. If we get some COVID money, I'd love to have our streets repaved, resurfaced, because it is, as I drive around the city, it doesn't matter what ward you're in. We've got some bad roads, even major roads are bad, bumpy, holy, sanctified, I guess. I don't know what we're going to do as these roads get worse. And hopefully winter won't be so bad that we don't have as many pitfalls. I do have a question, though, that I was going to email someone. So, Tanika, I'll ask you this. When you drive down New Walkertown Road, going from Waterworks Road to Carver School Road or to Winston Lake Golf Course Road. On the very right side, the side where Lakeside is, the streets in Lakeside that come into New Walkertown Road, every one of them has a hump. So when you're driving down, you're over the hump and you're over the hump and you're over the hump. And it's all from where Lakeside comes into New Walkertown Road. I don't know I don't know why that's there. I don't know if there are water mains there, because if you go too fast, it's like it's only one side of your car that's going over the hill. But I like to understand why it was engineered that way. You can just let me know in the future.
That's certainly an intriguing question. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Ms. Truff, thank you for the update, and we appreciate you getting the streets repaved as quick as you can. Thanks for all y'all's work. Let's go to the third and final general agenda item, please.
Item G3, shared micro mobility operations, electric scooters update.
And let's see, is that Mr. Burzik?
That's correct.
Mr. Burzik, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, council members and committee members. In the agenda item for this item, you'll notice an update regarding the last 12 months of operations for micromobility. This was the first year of the permit process that we went through. That kind of stemmed from the ordinance that was passed in March of 2019. So we are a year into that process, and we're actually going through the second round of permit applications and kind of fulfilling those permits, going through the steps required to get those the two operators up and running. We received 2 permit applications this year for electric scooters, no applications for bike operations. And through that permit application process, we had heard from some of the vendors. They expressed a few concerns with the ordinance that we have in place, and I wanted to share those concerns and bring those to your attention. You'll see the bullet points there: the fee structure, the indemnification requirements, and the requirement that all devices be removed from the public right-of-way each evening. In talking with the vendors and our city attorney's office, we're working through those questions about the fee structure and indemnification requirements. Specifically, the fee structure, that has turned out to be essentially a non-issue, and we're still working with the city attorney's office on the indemnification requirements in that agreement. The one issue that remains a concern for the vendors is the requirement that all devices be removed from the public right-of-way each evening. They cited the fact that the high costs incurred to remove all those devices each evening, and the fact that the costs associated with that would limit their operations potentially throughout the day, and result in essentially a negative consequence to their services throughout the day. And they requested that requirement be suspended temporarily while the city considers removing that requirement from the ordinance. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the ordinance, the permit process, or any of those requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Burzik. I will note that was that removal from the public right-of-way was a key part of the negotiating process when the council initially adopted our ordinance. That was a major source of complaints. I personally would have to recommend strongly against our even suspending it, much less consider removing it permanently. But motions are, or not for action tonight, of course, but other suggestions or questions are in order. I saw Councilmember Larson's hand and then Councilmember McIntosh's.
I could, my understanding is on this removal and non-removal question, part of it revolves around, do our sidewalks become storage lots? and simply become places that are not even accountable. When they have to remove them every day and replace them, we know they're going to be replaced properly, and they're going to be placed in the proper location, and they're going to be looked at and maintained accordingly. And I think that was part of the discussion that we were concerned about. Also, the other thing is, and my understanding is that there's a time limit after 9 o'clock that these scooters are not allowed out after dark. Is that not correct? And if they do not remove them at night, then how do we enforce the after-hour condition on this? I mean, I don't know if they can shut them off remotely or what, but I do see a problem with allowing that to happen. So, like my colleague Dan Bessie, I'm a little reluctant to back off too far and too quickly on that issue.
Councilor McIntosh.
Yeah, I guess my question is, are we effectively banning them if we say that we're not going to allow them to do that? Their willingness to do a pilot program sort of puts the onus on them to perform. If it is a problem, that's they had their opportunity. But if they can actually demonstrate that they are not a menace to society, I think we stand to benefit as a community. And they do have the ability to shut them off remotely.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mr. Burzik, thank you for the report. Thanks for all the staff and volunteers who work on this matter. Is there anything else to come before the committee this evening?
Dinner.
Seeing nothing else at the moment, I will thank everyone for participating and note that this committee meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.